high above the Earth, slicing through the sky like a shadow no radar can catch. The B-2 Spirit glides in eerie silence. From the ground, you'd never know it was there, and that's the point. This is no ordinary aircraft. It's a $2 billion piece of flying mystery, a machine so secretive that even today, decades after its debut, parts of its design remain classified. But what could possibly make a plane worth that staggering price tag? The answer isn't just in its looks, though its sleek, bat-like wings seem pulled straight from a science fiction movie. It's in what it can do, and more importantly, what it represents. Born in the final tense years of the Cold War, the B-2 wasn't just an airplane, it was a strategic statement to the world. The United States was telling its rivals, "We can strike anywhere, anytime, and you'll never see it coming." Its radar-absorbing skin, strange curved shape, and whisper-quiet engines all work together to make it virtually invisible to enemy defenses. Imagine a weapon so stealthy that it could slip past the most advanced detection systems without raising a single alarm. That wasn't just an advantage, it was a game-changer. But here's the thing that surprises most people. The B-2 didn't emerge from thin air. Behind those alien-like wings is a story of political secrecy, engineering obsession, and almost unbelievable cost overruns that had Congress questioning whether America could even afford to keep the project alive. And perhaps the most fascinating part, the B-2's mission today is very different from what its creators first imagined. So, how did this ghostly aircraft go from a Cold War nightmare to one of the most precise tools in modern warfare? That's the journey we're about to take. And at S1U1T, forget, the story of the B-2 Spirit begins in an era when the world's S2 superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were locked in a relentless game of military chess. By the late 1970s, America's military leaders faced a troubling reality. Soviet radar technology was improving at a pace that threatened to neutralize the USS long-range bomber fleet. Traditional aircraft like the B-52 Stratofortress, while powerful, were massive, loud, and, most importantly, visible on radar screens from hundreds of miles away. In the event of a nuclear conflict, their survival chances were slim. The Air Force needed something radically different, something that could vanish from enemy radar entirely. That's when the idea of stealth moved from theoretical research to an urgent, top-secret mission. Engineers from Northrop, a company that had already dabbled in unusual, futuristic aircraft designs, began sketching shapes that looked nothing like conventional planes. They turned to a principle called low observability, which meant creating an aircraft that could scatter or absorb radar waves rather than reflect them back. This required not only an unconventional shape, but also special materials, coatings so advanced that even their chemical composition was classified. It wasn't just engineers who were involved. This was a project born in the shadows of Washington politics. A small hand-picked group in the Pentagon managed the program under extreme secrecy, hiding budget lines in obscure documents and limiting knowledge to only those with the highest security clearance. At the time, even members of Congress had little idea of what was being built. The stakes were massive, not just in terms of cost, but in terms of the balance of power between East and West. One leak, one hint to Soviet intelligence, could have unraveled years of work. And then came the boldest decision, to design a bomber with no tail. No fuselage in the traditional sense, just a sweeping, alien-like wing. The concept was risky, untested at this scale, and incredibly expensive to prototype. But if it worked, it would make the B-2 not just a new aircraft, but a completely new category of weapon. Little did anyone know, this decision would define its legacy and ignite some of the fiercest debates in U.S. military history. By the early 1980s, the project had shifted from blueprints and wind tunnel models to full-scale development, and that's when the real challenges began. Building an aircraft invisible to radar wasn't just about its outer shape. It was a delicate balancing act between stealth, aerodynamics, and sheer practicality. Engineers faced a problem that seemed almost contradictory. How do you make something that can carry heavy weapons over thousands of miles, fly at high altitudes, and yet appear as little more than a bird or nothing at all on enemy radar? The answer came through a mix of groundbreaking materials, science, and unconventional design choices. The B-2 skin, for example, wasn't just painted metal. It was a composite structure layered with radar-absorbing materials so sensitive that even small imperfections could compromise its stealth. This meant maintenance wasn't just routine, it was obsessive. Technicians sometimes had to spend hours reapplying special coatings or fixing microscopic cracks that the naked eye couldn't see. Every inch of the aircraft mattered. Then there was the question of power and propulsion. The B-2 needed engines strong enough to carry it across continents. But traditional jet intakes and exhausts create massive heat signatures visible to infrared detection. Northrop's engineers solved this by burying the engines deep within the wing structure, using curved inlets and exhaust channels to hide them from prying eyes, or rather, from prying sensors. Even the landing gear doors were shaped and aligned in ways to deflect radar waves instead of reflecting them. But perfection came at a cost, a staggering one. By 1988, the price of each aircraft had ballooned into the hundreds of millions, and the total program cost was creeping toward numbers that made even the Pentagon nervous. Still, the Cold War was raging, and the idea of a bomber that could slip into Soviet airspace undetected was too tempting to abandon. Every time critics questioned the expense, military leaders pointed to one fact: if the B-2 worked as promised, it could change the rules of warfare forever. The gamble was huge, and as the first prototype rolled out under heavy security in Palmdale, California, the world got its first glimpse of what looked like an aircraft from another planet. What the public didn't know then was that the most important battles for the B-2's future would be fought not in the skies, but in the halls of Congress. When the B-2 Spirit was officially unveiled in November 1988, it was like a magician finally revealing a trick. But only part of it. Under the bright lights of the rollout ceremony, the jet-black flying wing looked more like a prop from a futuristic movie than a real combat aircraft. Cameras flashed, reporters scrambled for details, and defense analysts stared in disbelief at its smooth, curved surfaces that seemed to defy every principle of conventional aircraft design. But as striking as the B-2's appearance was, much of its true capability remained hidden. The Air Force was careful, almost paranoid, about what could be revealed. Even the viewing angles for the press were controlled to prevent photographs from showing certain details. Behind the spectacle, the reality was more complicated. By this point, the Cold War was showing cracks. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms and arms control talks were beginning to shift the political landscape. And suddenly, some in Washington were questioning whether such an expensive stealth bomber was still necessary. Critics argued that nuclear tensions were cooling, and that other systems, like intercontinental ballistic missiles, could deliver the same deterrence for a fraction of the cost. But supporters of the program countered with a chilling point. Global politics could change overnight. The B-2 wasn't just a weapon for the Cold War. It was insurance for whatever threats lay ahead. Its ability to carry both nuclear and conventional weapons meant it could adapt to any future conflict, and its stealth meant it could reach targets that no other bomber could without support. For the Pentagon, that flexibility was priceless. Still, the price tag was becoming harder to defend. Early estimates of around $500 million per aircraft were long gone. By the late 80s, the cost had soared to over $1 billion each, and it was still climbing. Every time a new figure leaked, headlines blasted the billion-dollar bomber, fueling political firestorms. Yet, despite the criticism, the program survived, partly because canceling it would have meant admitting that billions of taxpayer dollars had already been sunk into a dead-end project. As the first B-2 South began test flights over the California desert, their performance was nothing short of astonishing. They were stable, quiet, and as far as radar was concerned, nearly invisible. The technology was real. The question now was whether the B-2 would prove itself in a world that might no longer need it. Or in a world that would need it more than ever. The 1990s would become the true proving ground for the B-2 Spirit, but not in the way its designers originally imagined. The Cold War had ended, the Soviet Union had collapsed, and the very enemy, the B-2, was built to outwit, no longer existed. For a moment, it looked as if the world's most expensive bomber might never see combat at all. Some in Congress began openly suggesting that the program should be cut short with only a handful of aircraft built. Originally, the Air Force had planned to buy 130 to B-2s, enough to maintain a round-the-clock nuclear deterrent. But budget pressures, combined with shifting military priorities, forced a painful decision. Only 21 would ever be produced. Each one would cost roughly $2 billion. When you included research and development, an almost incomprehensible figure that cemented the B-2's reputation as the most expensive aircraft in history. Still, the Pentagon wasn't about to let the B-2 become an irrelevant relic. Military strategists began looking at how its stealth and precision capabilities could be applied to conventional warfare. The thinking was simple. Why not use this ghostly aircraft to strike heavily defended targets without risking large bomber formations or the lives of dozens of pilots? That opportunity came in 1999 during the NATO bombing campaign in Kosovo. The B-2 flew its first combat missions from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. And here's the remarkable part. It did so without stopping anywhere in between. Crews would spend more than 30 hours in the cockpit, flying halfway around the world, striking targets with pinpoint accuracy, and then returning home. Enemy radar barely registered them. Serbian air defenses, considered formidable at the time, were powerless to stop the sleek, black wings overhead. The success in Kosovo proved that the B-2 wasn't just a Cold War ghost. It was a precision instrument for modern conflicts. But while the missions were impressive, they also raised a provocative question for the American public. Was it really worth sending a $2 billion plane halfway across the globe when cheaper aircraft and cruise missiles could do the job? Supporters insisted the answer was yes, pointing to the B-2's unmatched ability to strike high-value targets deep inside defended territory without a single warning. That debate, cost versus capability, would follow the B-2 through every mission it ever flew. And in the years to come, it would be tested in some of the most volatile regions on Earth. The early 2000s brought a new kind of war, one defined not by superpower standoffs, but by sudden, unpredictable threats emerging from distant corners of the globe. For the B-2 Spirit, this shift meant an entirely new role. No longer a silent guardian against nuclear Armageddon, it became a scalpel for striking terrorist networks, rogue states, and hardened military targets in the heart of hostile territory. Its moment came in the opening hours of the Iraq War in 2003. As coalition forces prepared to invade, the B-2 was tasked with delivering the first wave of precision strikes against Saddam Hussein's command and control infrastructure. Once again, the bombers launched from Missouri, flew for more than a full day, struck their targets, and returned without landing anywhere along the way. The scale of these missions was almost unimaginable. Tens of thousands of miles round trip, all without being detected until it was too late. In these operations, the B-2 showcased its most fearsome capability, the ability to carry and deploy precision-guided munitions with devastating accuracy. Inside its bomb bays, it could hold everything from bunker-busting bombs designed to shatter fortified structures, to satellite-guided weapons capable of hitting a specific window from miles in the sky. The effect was both tactical and psychological. Enemy forces knew that no matter how well they hid, the Spirit could find them. Yet, with each mission, the conversation back home remained the same. Could any aircraft truly justify such a colossal cost? Critics pointed out that in the age of drones and cheaper strike fighters, the B-2 seemed like an extravagance. Supporters countered that no other aircraft combined its range, stealth, and payload in a single package, and that, in high-stakes scenarios, the cost of failure would dwarf the cost of the plane itself. Over time, the B-2 became more than a weapon. It became a symbol whenever it appeared in the news. Whether on a runway, in a flyover, or in grainy combat footage, it carried with it an unspoken message. The United States can reach you no matter where you are, and in the coming years. That message would be delivered in some of the most sensitive and dangerous missions of the 21st century. By the mid-2000s, the B-2 Spirit had cemented its place as one of the most elite tools in America's military arsenal. But its missions were often so secretive that the public rarely heard about them in real time. Many of its most impactful operations wouldn't be fully acknowledged until years later, if at all. This shroud of secrecy only fueled the bomber's mystique. It was just a machine. It was a ghost whose presence was felt long after it had vanished from the sky. One of the most notable examples came in 2011. During the opening stages of the NATO-led intervention in Libya, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's forces had heavily fortified air defense systems, confident they could deter any air campaign. But within hours of the operation's launch, B-2 South had flown from Missouri to North Africa, dropping precision-guided bombs on key airfields and missile sites. Those strikes effectively dismantled Libya's air defense network before it even had a chance to respond. It was a textbook example of what the B-2 was built to do: eliminate threats before the enemy even knows they re-enter attack. What made these missions even more remarkable was their complexity. B-2 crews had to operate with near-perfect coordination, relying on satellite communications, mid-air refueling, and precise navigation over thousands of miles. The slightest miscalculation, even a few seconds off course, could risk detection or mission failure. Yet again and again, the Spirit delivered, hitting targets with surgical precision and disappearing back into the night. But behind the scenes, the aircraft's age was starting to show. Maintaining the B-2 was a logistical and financial challenge unlike any other. Its delicate radar-absorbing skin required climate-controlled hangars, and routine servicing could take weeks. Each mission demanded not just pilots and planners, but an entire support ecosystem. This meant the B-2 was as much a marvel of maintenance and logistics as it was of engineering. And still, the debate raged. Was the B-2 an irreplaceable strategic asset or an over-engineered relic from another era? That question would loom even larger as new threats emerged. New technology appeared, and whispers began about its eventual successor, a bomber designed to carry the Spirit's legacy into a new generation of stealth warfare. As the 2010s unfolded, the B-2 Spirit found itself at the crossroads of history, still unmatched in capability, yet facing a rapidly changing world. New adversaries were investing heavily in advanced radar systems, hypersonic missiles, and electronic warfare technology designed to challenge even the most elusive aircraft. For the first time since its debut, the B-2's stealth advantage was no longer seen as untouchable. The U.S. Air Force knew that to keep the Spirit relevant, it couldn't just rely on its original 1980s design. Upgrades became a constant process. Its radar systems were replaced with more advanced, low probability of intercept technology. Defensive systems were enhanced to counter evolving missile threats. Even its bomb bays were modified to accommodate next-generation munitions, including the massive ordnance penetrator, a weapon capable of destroying deeply buried bunkers that no other bomber could touch. Despite these advancements, the core challenge remained. There were only 21 B-2 South ever built, and each one represented an irreplaceable piece of U.S. air power. Losing even one would be a strategic blow. This reality was driven home in 2008, when a B-2 crashed on takeoff in Guam due to a sensor malfunction. Thankfully, both pilots ejected safely. But the incident underscored how precious and fragile the fleet really was. With only 20 left, every mission carried not just military risk, but the weight of safeguarding a national treasure. In this environment, the Air Force began working on the B-21 Raider, a new stealth bomber intended to eventually take over the B-2's role. But until the Raider was ready, the Spirit would remain the only aircraft in the world capable of combining extreme range, heavy payload, and near invisibility in one platform. Military planners understood this, which is why, even in the face of budget pressures, the B-2 continued to receive upgrades, training, and operational priority. And for the American public, the Spirit had become more than a weapon. It was an icon, a reminder of what happens when engineering ambition meets national determination. Whenever it appeared at air shows or on the news, it inspired the same mix of awe and curiosity that it had on the day it was unveiled. But for those in the know, the B-2's real legacy was written not in headlines, but in missions the world would never hear about. The B-2 Spirit's legacy is built on a paradox. It is one of the most famous aircraft in the world, yet much of its history remains hidden. For decades, its most critical missions have been classified, locked away in reports that may not be declassified for generations. What the public sees, the rare flyovers, the carefully staged photos, the occasional combat footage, is only a fraction of the story. Behind the scenes, the Spirit has been involved in operations that have shaped geopolitics without a single shot being broadcast on television. Its unique combination of stealth, range, and precision has made it the ultimate tool for first-strike scenarios, the kind of missions where success must be absolute, and failure is not an option. This is why, even in an age dominated by drones, satellites, and cyber warfare, the B-2 has remained relevant. When the U.S. military needs to neutralize a threat deep inside hostile territory without alerting the enemy, the Spirit is often the first, and sometimes the only, choice. The aircraft's mystique has also given it an unusual place in popular culture. It's been featured in documentaries, news specials, and even Hollywood films, often portrayed as the pinnacle of American technological dominance. But the real story is far more complex. The B-2 isn't just a symbol of power, it's a testament to persistence. The persistence of engineers who overcame seemingly impossible design challenges, of crews who endure grueling 30-hour missions, and of a military establishment that fought to keep the program alive through shifting political winds. Yet the clock is ticking. The B-2 is now over 3 decades old, and no amount of upgrades can change the fact that it was conceived in a world that no longer exists. Its eventual replacement, the B-21. Today, the B-2 Spirit occupies a rare space in military history, not just as a weapon, but as a strategic deterrent that has shaped global calculations for more than 30 years. Every time it lifts off from Whiteman Air Force Base, there's an unspoken understanding somewhere in the world. A target exists that demands absolute precision, total secrecy, and unquestionable success. It's a role few machines have ever held, and one that has given the B-2 an almost mythical reputation among both allies and adversaries. Its missions are still measured in extremes, extreme distances, extreme endurance, extreme stakes. Pilots train for years before earning the right to fly it, and even then, each sortie demands flawless execution. Behind every flight is an army of maintainers, planners, and support crews who treat the aircraft with the care one might give a priceless artifact, because in many ways, that's exactly what it is, a flying relic of the Cold War that has adapted to survive in a world it was never originally designed for. And yet, even as the B-21 Raider prepares to take its place in the next generation of stealth warfare, the Spirit's story is far from over. The Air Force has made it clear, the B-2 will remain operational well into the 2030s, continuing to serve as both a deterrent and a precision strike platform until the very last day it flies. It will carry with it the same silent promise it made on its maiden mission: to appear without warning, strike without mercy, and vanish without a trace. For those who have seen it in the sky, it's a moment you never forget. A black, otherworldly silhouette gliding effortlessly overhead, as if gravity and time have no hold on it. For those who have heard its engines, the sound is less of a roar and more of a whisper, the quiet confidence of unmatched power. And for those who have served with it, the B-2 Spirit is more than steel, composites, and circuitry. It is a reminder that sometimes the most powerful presence in the sky is the one you can TC until it's too late. The $2 billion bomber may one day pass into history, but its legend will remain. A ghost in the clouds, forever etched into the story of how technology, ambition, and strategy came together to create one of the most extraordinary aircraft the world has ever known.